In a city older than time itself, hidden among crumbling alleyways and forgotten streets, there exists a library unlike any other. Locals speak of it only in whispers, passing the tale down through generations. A library that appears once every 100 years. It's said that the books housed inside are not meant to be read, for they hold something far more dangerous than knowledge. To open a book from this library is to risk losing a piece of yourself. The Vanishing Library, as it is called, does not exist in any map or document. It is a fleeting presence, an enigma that appears when the stars align, only to vanish again without a trace. Few have entered, and fewer still have emerged unscathed. For those who do survive the experience, their memories are fractured, with entire lifetimes missing. Yet the allure of forbidden knowledge draws people in, and this time one such person is an ambitious scholar, drawn by rumors of the library's return. Dr. Eliana Carter, a distinguished scholar in ancient literature and mythology, had spent years chasing the legend of the Vanishing Library. She had scoured texts in dead languages, traced cryptic symbols in forgotten temples, and pieced together every fragment of rumor that led her closer to the library's return. As a specialist in lost knowledge, this was her greatest obsession, and she had dedicated her life to finding it. Her research had led her to believe that the library would reappear during the next blood moon, an event that was only days away. The location, according to her calculations, would be in the old quarter of the city, a district abandoned for centuries and left to decay. For weeks, Eliana had explored these ruins, searching for any sign of the elusive library. On the eve of the blood moon, Eliana found herself standing before an ancient building, covered in ivy and barely visible through the mist that rolled through the narrow streets. There was nothing remarkable about the structure, except for one small detail, a faint glow emanating from beneath the door. Her heart raced. This was it. The Vanishing Library had returned. Eliana pushed open the heavy wooden door, and a rush of cold air greeted her. The library's interior was vast, far larger than the building had appeared from the outside. Row upon row of towering bookshelves stretched into the shadows, their contents dusty and untouched by time. The air was thick with the scent of old paper, ink, and something else, something darker. The room was dimly lit by flickering lanterns that seemed to float in the air, casting long shadows that danced across the walls. There was an unnatural stillness to the place, as if the library existed outside of time itself. Eliana could feel the weight of the silence pressing down on her. It was as though the very air was warning her to leave, but her curiosity was stronger than her fear. Her eyes were drawn to a large wooden desk in the center of the room. Upon it lay a single open book. The pages were blank, yet as she approached, words began to form across the surface in a language she couldn't quite recognize. She reached out to touch the book, but before her fingers could graze the pages, a soft whisper echoed through the library. "Do not open it." Eliana froze. She turned, expecting to find someone behind her, but there was no one. The library was empty. Eliana's hesitation quickly turned to resolve. She had come too far to turn back now. She had spent her entire life in pursuit of this moment, and the knowledge hidden within these walls could change everything. Ignoring the warning, she pulled a book from the nearest shelf. It was heavy and bound in dark leather, its cover worn and cracked with age. There was no title, but something about it felt familiar. As she opened the book, the text inside began to shift and rearrange, forming coherent sentences in a language she could suddenly understand. She began to read, her eyes devouring the words. The story that unfolded was strange and unsettling, recounting the life of a person long forgotten, a life that felt intimately connected to her own. The further she read, the more engrossed she became, losing track of time, losing herself in the narrative. It wasn't until she reached the final page that she realized something was terribly wrong. Her mind felt fragmented. The memories of her past, the years of research, the faces of her friends and family began to slip away, as if they were being replaced by the story she had just read. She tried to close the book, but her hands wouldn't obey her. Panic set in as she realized that the book was not simply telling a story, it was stealing her memories. Desperate, Eliana tore her gaze from the pages and slammed the book shut. She dropped it to the floor and backed away, her heart racing. She clutched her head, trying to hold on to the fragments of her identity that were slipping away. It was too late. Entire years of her life were gone, erased, replaced by the memories of a stranger. As Eliana struggled to regain control of her mind, she became aware of another presence in the room. A figure stepped out from the shadows, a tall, cloaked man whose face was hidden beneath the hood of his robe. He moved silently, gliding toward her her with an unnatural grace. "You were warned," the figure said, his voice low and cold. "The books here are not meant for human eyes. They do not simply tell stories. They take, they replace." Eliana stared at the figure, her heart pounding. Who are you?" she managed to whisper. "I am the librarian," the figure replied. "I am the guardian of this place, and I protect the knowledge within these walls. But the knowledge comes with a price you have already paid." Eliana's mind was spinning. Why? Why does this happen? What is this place? The librarian paused as if considering how much to reveal. "This library exists beyond time. It is a collection of all the stories, all the lives that have been forgotten. Each book contains the memories of those who once lived, but when you read from the pages, their memories become your own. And in exchange, you lose a piece of yourself. That is the nature of this place. It has always been, and it will always be." Eliana felt a chill run down her spine. She had spent her life seeking knowledge, but never had she imagined the cost would be so great. She wanted to leave, but the pull of the library was too strong. Despite the fear coursing through her veins, there was a part of her that was still drawn to the books. There was so much more to learn, so many lives to uncover, but the more she stayed, the more her mind began to unravel. She tried to resist, but every step she took brought her back to the bookshelves. She pulled another book from the shelf and opened it, unable to stop herself. The words on the page leapt out at her, flooding her mind with memories that were not her own. She could feel her own thoughts being pushed aside, replaced by the life of a long-dead king, a warrior, a peasant, people whose names she couldn't even remember. Each book took a little more of her, until she could barely recall who she was. The library was erasing her, rewriting her existence one memory at a time. She could no longer distinguish between the stories in the books and her own past. In a final desperate bid to hold on to her sanity, Eliana made for the door. She stumbled through the shelves, her mind a jumbled mess of stolen lives. The librarian watched her go, his expression unreadable. As she reached the door, Eliana paused for one last moment, glancing back at the endless rows of books. The temptation to return was overwhelming, but she knew if she did, she would be lost forever. With a deep breath, she forced herself to turn away and stepped through the door. The cold night air hit her like a shock to the system, clearing the fog from her mind. She had escaped, but she was not the same person who had entered. Whole years of her life were missing, replaced by fragments of other people's memories. She no longer knew who she truly was. As the sun began to rise, the library behind her faded into nothingness, vanishing as if it had never been there at all. Eliana stood alone in the empty street, clutching her head as the memories of the library faded as well. Soon, even the memory of her time inside would be gone, leaving her with nothing but an overwhelming sense of loss. The vanishing library had taken what it wanted, and Eliana would never be whole again. And so, the library waits, hidden from the world until the next blood moon, when it will return to claim more memories, more lives, more stories to fill its endless shelves.